Tomorrow is Veterans Day, and I asked Isaac if I could use this opportunity to pass along some of my thoughts on the meaning of that day. I've been a money counter here at the church for almost a quarter century, and when I first started counting, my companions in this task were Bud and Connie McGee. They're no longer with us, or maybe I should just say they're dead now, but I'm sure that many of you still remember them. Anyway, one day Bud came in to count, wearing one of those baseball caps with the ship's name stenciled on it. USS Gambier Bay, CVE 73. Now to you Philistines in the Army and the Air Force, that may not mean anything, but to those of us in the Navy, well, in October of 1944, during World War II, the Japanese came up with a plan to attack General MacArthur's landing on the island of Leyte in the Philippines. They would sacrifice their aircraft carriers to lure the American carriers north, while two groups of battleships would sneak through the Philippine Islands and attack the landing site. In part, this plan was successful, and on the morning of October 25th, 1944, 4 Japanese battleships and 19 other ships steamed out of San Bernardino Straits, where they were met by a very surprised group of 7 destroyers and 6 small aircraft carriers that were supporting the Army forces ashore. One of those aircraft carriers was the USS Gambier Bay. Their spirited defense at great cost and some confusion on the part of the Japanese admiral resulted in the Japanese forces retreating without damaging the landing area. I asked Bud if he had been at Leyte Gulf that morning, and he said that he had. So this very unassuming, almost diminutive man was in fact a giant who had fought at one of the U.S. Navy's finest hours. If he hadn't worn that baseball cap, I would never have known. My own naval service is much less memorable. I fired no shots in anger, and perhaps more to the point, no one fired any such shots at me. But like millions of men and women before and after, I did my job, I stood my watch, and if nothing particularly bad happened during that time, well, perhaps in some very small measure, that is to my credit. Now, some years ago, Ginger gave a sermon about the 3 phrases we most want to hear. Number 1 was I love you, followed by I forgive you, and dinner's ready. Had she added a 4th, thank you would have been a good candidate. So I appreciate it when someone thanks me for my service, but I'm never quite sure that I really merit such thanks, given the much greater sacrifices made by so many. And in some ways, any such thanks is really wasted on me. Let's face it, my day is past. I am no longer really qualified to serve in the forces that guard our country. Certainly not physically, and if you believe my wife, probably not mentally either. So even if the spirit is willing, the flesh is weak. And in all honesty, I can no longer fit into my old uniform, a characteristic, I might add, that I share with other veterans in the congregation. So what then is the point of Veterans Day? I believe that the target audience for Veterans Day, to use a marketing term, is really our children, as it is on them that the defense of American democracy will eventually rest. I know that some of you already have sons and daughters in the armed forces, or grandchildren already serving. But even for those of us without children in the armed forces, no one knows what the future will bring. Who can say that the day will never come when our country will again have to call upon thousands or millions of our sons and daughters to defend our freedoms? If that day comes, our children need to answer that call, and they need to know that we, their fellow citizens, will always honor their service and remember their sacrifices, whether great or small, just as we honor and remember the service of those who came before us. So to all you veterans out there, God bless you, and thank you for your service.